one world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Sunday edition. It is September 9th, 2012, 2 days before the 11-year anniversary of 9/11, 2001. Some people don't even know what that date is or why it's significant. The younger generations, which completely just blows my mind. But even in the course of 11 years, it's amazing what kind of true history could be swept under the rug. Now, last year, I put together a special video, a debunking video, going off on Fox News and Popular Mechanics. Not really going off, that's actually the wrong terminology. Breaking down their crap would be the better way to put it. And it got a lot of airtime on YouTube. It was on 3 different channels. Three. And all 3 of them had to be removed from eventually because people claimed copyright strikes on it, and Fox News complained about it, and all this other stuff. And I kept getting strikes and warnings and use of guideline things and everything else. It was amazing how this video got attacked. And it was about an hour and 37 minutes long. And I'm not going to have time to be able to fit in there'll be about maybe 10 or 15 minutes of audio that you guys won't be able to hear, but I'm going to play most of it. And what I did was I took this Fox News clip that Fox News had put together with James Megs from Popular Mechanics, and they put this debunking hit piece out against 9/11 Truth last year for the 10-year anniversary. And on the Business Network, they had their little gruesome twosome of Eric Bolling and what's her name? The Man Coulter, the same woman that said that the Japanese people should be happy that they're getting exposed to Fukushima radiation. So, because the anniversary is 2 days away, I could sit here all day and I could go over this evidence myself and let you listen to me blab, or I could just play the clip, certain clips from the movie for you, which is what I really want to do, because the movie really destroys their little debunking thing. So I'm going to play some of the audio from it for you, and you'll hear different people like David Ray Griffin. You'll hear a couple clips from a couple different 9/11 Truth films. that I used. One of them is the newest Loose Change one. You'll hear Daniel Sunjata's voice because he was narrating some stuff from it. They were actually one of the company, not Daniel Sunjata. He had nothing to do with it, but it was Dylan Avery, and the company Micro Films or Micro Cinema or something like that they worked with, or whatever the hell the company's called. The company that he worked with to put out the new film and release it. They still, to this day, if someone puts a full-length copy of it up on YouTube. Now, that movie came out 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago now, and they still will put copyright strikes on YouTube and yank the movie down so people can't see it. And that's one of the reasons they were one of the people that put a copyright strike on this on YouTube, because they... I guess they weren't getting their money or whatever, which when I talked to them about this when they first released the film in an email to me, I was told by the company that it would diminish the message if it were released for free. People won't take it seriously, which I found to be disgusting and just a piss-poor excuse for wanting to make $1 off the film. And I understand you want to recoup some of your efforts. But 3 years later, you're still going to sit and pull copyright strikes on people on YouTube for using a clip of your film. Your film wasn't even released in movie theaters. It's not like Warner Brothers made it. And this is the kind of behavior I would expect from a big, company like Warner Brothers or Universal or whoever. It's not the kind of behavior I would expect from somebody trying to release a film about one of the most heinous events in this country's history, and that you're trying to put out a film with factual evidence in it, and yet you're going to go the marketing route of the big time movie houses. Anyway, I'm not coming on air today to bitch about certain people. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that's why the video is not available for YouTube. So I will be playing the audio from it, and the very beginning. After it was a couple minutes into it, I showed the first original full clip, and it was, about 3.5, 4 minutes long, this clip from Fox News, and it was Steve Ducey from Morons in the Morning, and this other idiot, James Megs, and they were sitting at the table, and they were, of course, they had images and an American flag and everything up behind James Megs, like he's a patriot. All this other brainwashing garbage that they do. You don't even realize they're doing it subconsciously. And they go over how there's no evidence, the Building 7 stuff. There's no evidence about, Flight 93. There's conspiracies with that. There's conspiracies with the Twin Towers. So at each turn, even the Pentagon. So at each turn, they say something, and you'll hear... as I'm playing it, you'll hear James Meggs and Steve Ducey say something stupid or say a complete fallacy, and then you'll hear the static, like a channel changer, and then you'll hear the clip pick up. And the reason I did that was so that people could differentiate between what was James Meggs and the other moron from Fox and what was being presented as evidence to refute their pathetic little argument against 9/11. And I'm actually surprised that the 11-year anniversary coming up, I have not seen news reports. I have not seen any even little minute-and-a-half video snippets, nothing of people taking swipes at the 9/11 truth movement. I'm actually kind of surprised. Even years before, they took swipes at it. So now I think the plan of attack is to act like it's they always acted like you were fringe if you believe that, but it's almost like they don't even want to air any type of video to give it credence because they know more and more people are waking up. So they'd rather just pretend it doesn't exist, and if someone does bring it up, act like they're the lunatic fringe and nobody else out there holds that point of view, and then use straw man arguments or red herring type arguments to keep everybody else around that person. Because usually when someone's confronted, there's a bunch of people around. And if you notice, when people are confronted, they resort to logical fallacies like ad hominem attacks, red herrings, or straw man arguments, which is usually the favorite. You build a weaker version of the original argument and attack that because you know you could win it. And then, everybody around them, it's the court of public opinion. They see you arguing, and they see this person make a cute little quip. Oh, he's so fast, he's so smart to deal with these pesky protesters. And it's a logical fallacy. So, on the other side of the break, when we come back in, I'm going to start the video, and it's going to pick up first getting into James Megs a little bit. I'm learning about James Megs and Popular Mechanics. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to tune in Wednesday night, special commercial-free broadcast for 2 hours with Mark Passio going over the occult aspects of 9/11. We did the breakdown of the Matrix movies a couple weeks ago, and we didn't get a chance to, because there's so much info with what we were talking about, we didn't get a chance to get into the occult aspects of 9/11, so Mark was generous enough to do a pre-recorded show with me. I interviewed him a few days ago off air, and I'm going to play it Wednesday night special, 2 hour, uninterrupted, no commercials, except for the top of the hour break in between hour 1 and hour 2. And you'll be able to hear everything that we were getting into about 9/11 and the occult aspects of it. And trust me, even if you think you know the occult symbolism, the occult, and occult meaning hidden. So the hidden symbolism and the hidden meaning and the hidden things that were going on behind the scenes other than just the official story and all the debunking that you're going to hear today, poo-pooing the government's official version and then poo-pooing Fox News and Popular Mechanics and their attempt to take down 9/11 truth. This is a complete different aspect. This stuff is the things that Mark and I cover are just amazing. So if you haven't gotten a chance to ever hear Mark talk about the occult aspects, even if you have, I suggest you tune in because we went, Mark and I went into super, super detail about this. We were actually originally only going to do like a 45-minute or an hour-long broadcast, and it ended up being a little over 2 hours. So make sure you tune in Wednesday. We're going to go deep down the rabbit hole. Okay, here we go. I'm going to play the audio from my debunking Fox News and Popular Mechanics attack on 9/11 truth from last year. And let's start off, let's get a little bit of perspective on Popular Mechanics and James Megs. Now, in this video, in the Fox News clip, you'll hear them reference James Meggs' book. When they reference Meggs' book, they're acting like this is the end-all, be-all for 9/11 and that this tells you everything you need to know. Just go see his book and that's it. That's all you need to know. Now, the book first came out in 2006. The copy that they're talking about, the edition, I should say, that they're talking about in this clip that you'll hear them throughout the rest of the day here with me, when they mention his book, they're mentioning a reprint with updates to attack architects and engineers for 9/11 truth and anything that has to deal with nanothermite or bombs being planted in the building and the explosive residue that was found, anything like that. So they had to reprint it to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. Okay, here we go. First, let's get into Popular Mechanics and James Meggs. Let's see what David Ray Griffin has to say about this.
The semi-official status of the Popular Mechanics book is demonstrated by the fact that it was endorsed by Condoleezza Rice's State Department as providing excellent material debunking 9/11 conspiracy theories. Popular Mechanics says of itself that it was ideally equipped to research the evidence about 9/11 because of its more than 100 years of expertise in science and technology. However, just before the magazine began working on 9/11, the president of Hearst Magazines, Kathleen Black, who is married to a former employee of the CIA and the Department of Defense, replaced much of the staff, including the longtime creative director and the editor-in-chief. Moreover, one of the new members of the staff, who described himself as the senior researcher for the magazine's 2005 article about 9/11, on which its 2006 book is based, was Benjamin Chertoff, a cousin of the head of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff. When Benjamin's mother was asked whether he was related to Michael Chertoff, she said, "Yes, of course, he's his cousin." But the new editor-in-chief at Popular Mechanics, James Megs, has tried to cast doubt on this connection. He misquotes her statement. Then he speaks of the odd coincidence that the two men have the same last name. And he allows only that it's possible that Ben and Michael are distantly related. This is one of the unintentionally hilarious moments in this book. Although Megs claims that he and his crack staff were able in just a few months to discover the truth about why the hijacked airliners were not intercepted, why the 3 buildings came down, and what happened at the Pentagon, and what happened to Flight 93. They could not discover whether a member of their own staff was related to the head of Homeland Security. The moral of this discussion, in any case, is that none of these official or semi-official reports can be assumed to be the unvarnished truth about 9/11 or anything close. However, many journalists, treating these reports as if they were authoritative, have been led to absurd conclusions.
Now, who really is James Megs? What's his scientific background? And like it says in the video, it's a fair question to ask of the man and his quote-unquote major media magazine, which are both dedicated to bolstering the government explanation of the collapses and attacking anybody that has any different theory. And the explanation that they push forward has been rejected by many real scientists and engineers and people that have an education in firefighting or engineering. Go look at what I think it was the editor-in-chief at the time of Fire Engineering magazine wrote about the cleanup. He said it was a half-baked farce about what they were doing, that they were destroying evidence. Now, why would you destroy evidence before you've even gotten a chance to investigate? How did Popular Mechanics investigate this? Okay, and then when you look at Megs's background, okay, before he went to go work at Hearst Publications. Work for Hearst Publications, I should say, at Popular Mechanics in 2004, he had a bunch of different positions. None of them, okay, I may add, were in the engineering field at all. Anything to do with building code, any type of thing. He doesn't even have a degree in science. He doesn't have any type of scientific background. He's got a bachelor's degree in philosophy. So I guess that makes him the foremost expert. And he used to be the editor-in-chief of Entertainment Weekly. Senior editor of Entertainment Weekly, 1989 and 93. That's his qualifications. He edited a magazine which talked about TV and movies. And you think he's going to tell you the truth? I doubt it.
10 years after the September the 11th attacks, wild conspiracy theories and myths still persist. Countless books and websites are devoted to claiming that the U.S. government actually was involved in the terrible events of that day. But now one book is proving all those conspiracy theories are wrong. Jim Megs is the editor-in-chief of Popular Mechanics and the author of the new book, Debunking 9/11 Myths. Good morning to you, Jim.
Great to be here.
You were here back in 2005 where Popular Mechanics examined a bunch of the myths supposedly based on hard evidence. Where did these things come from initially?
Well, you know, so many people, they had a hard time believing the mainstream view that that Al-Qaeda terrorists did this action. And a lot of people had their own favorite villain, so they wanted to look at the evidence and come up with some other explanation for what really happened.
All right, let's go through some of them, and I want you to expand on some of them. First up, we heard this, air defenses were ordered to stand down. You said that's not the case. Now, this is...
Norman Mineta was Secretary of Transportation from 2001 to 2006. On the morning of September 11th, when the first plane struck the World Trade Center, Mineta headed to the White House to enter the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC. At the May 2003 hearing of the 9/11 Commission, Mineta testified the following.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time, I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And so I was not aware that discussion had already taken place. And but in listening to the conversation between the young man and the Vice President, then at the time I didn't really recognize the significance of that. And then later I heard of the fact that the airplanes had been scrambled.
Let me see if I understand. The plane that was headed toward the Pentagon and was some miles away, there was an order to shoot that plane down.
Well, I don't know that specifically, but I do know that the airplanes were scrambled from Langley or from Norfolk, the Norfolk area, and but I did not know about the order specifically, other than listening to that other conversation.
But there very clearly was an order to shoot commercial aircraft.
Subsequently, I found that out.
What were the orders? If they were to intercept Flight 77, why was it allowed to strike the Pentagon?
Interesting. There are a number of experts who say that a missile or a military jet hit the Pentagon. We know it was a jet, but where did this missile thing come from?
One of the first conspiracy theories, and there was a best-selling book in France on this, saying it was some kind of a cruise missile or something. This fell apart once you really look into it. They found the wreckage of the plane in the Pentagon. They identified the DNA of the passengers. There's actually pictures of the wreckage. And yet, if you go on websites, you'll still see this one repeated.
No kidding. Also,
according to the official story of the 11th of September, at 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. This rare footage shows the scene immediately after the impact, an hour before the entire structure collapsed. As you can see, it is a rather unusual scene. One would reasonably expect to see something of this sort. That is to say, pieces of the airplane, suitcases, debris everywhere, just like every other air crash on land. Instead, there is no substantial visual evidence of debris.
I have been on some accident investigation sites in the Air Force, and I have never come across any accident scene where there's no telltale evidence of the airplane that crashed. Here we have airplane sites, crash sites, that give zero evidence.
Where did the aeroplane go? Did it break up against the wall of the Pentagon? If it had done so, thousands of parts of the plane should have been scattered all over the disaster zone.
You know, things like engines and landing gears, brakes and tires are very difficult to destroy. Very difficult, because they're made out of very high-tempered steel, and I don't believe the airplane could be made to go fast enough to pulverize those things. I've never seen that happen before. You look around, there's a 16-foot hole for an airplane that's 100 and some feet wide.
According to the official story, the American Airlines Boeing 757 disappeared inside this hole. Can you see it? 5 meters. I repeat, 5 meters in diameter. Let's make some calculations. A Boeing 757 is, including its wingspan, of course, 38 meters wide. And including the rudder or the tail fin, it is 13.5 meters high. To get all of this huge aircraft into a hole 5 meters wide seems rather implausible to me. In this picture, we can see a row of windows on this side and another row on that side. They should have been smashed and destroyed by the wings, and instead they're intact. These windows aren't even broken. For years, the military refused to answer the questions of an increasing number of people who rejected the official version. When the French journalist Thierry Meyssan published the book The Incredible Lie, utterly surreal explanations were put forward to shut the detractors up. One of these maintained that the airplane had been vaporized by the speed and the force of the crash. One very strange thing that doesn't make sense is the disappearance of various components of this Boeing. For example, the 2 engines. And what about the plane's wings? Where did they go? Had they been gasified? Instead, we are told the fuselage remained intact, and it smashed through the whole outer wall of the Pentagon and emerged through the other side, destroying a number of columns. The most solid part of the airplane is, without any doubt, the engines. In fact, these engines are made of a titanium steel alloy. It is so tough that it doesn't even melt at 3,000 degrees centigrade. Well now, in this wall we should be able to see, if nothing else, the holes made by the 2 engines that smashed into it. No, there is no sign of them. The 2 holes that we'd expect to see are not there.
And there's no indication of the wings hitting anything at the Pentagon, like you had at the North Tower. You can see the outline of the aircraft, the 25-degree bank angle. You can clearly see the outline of the number 1 engine, fuselage, the number 2 engine. It's a 25-degree bank. The wing dihedral is up in flight, and you can clearly see the outline of that airplane. But you can't find anything like that on the Pentagon. You can't find anything like that on the Pentagon.
These inconsistencies have created more and more difficulties for the proponents of the official version.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll pause it right there. Coming back in on the other side of the break, I will pick it up. So stay tuned. More debunking, 9/11 debunking by Fox News and Popular Mechanics. We'll be right back.
General Arnold, that very morning, immediately after that alleged impact, ordered one of his fighter pilots to fly over and down to the Pentagon to look and see what he saw and to report back to General Larry Arnold himself.
At that time, Major General Larry Arnold was Commander of Aviation at NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, in charge of protecting the United States and Canada.
His fighter pilot reported back to him that there was no evidence, zero evidence, of an impact of a plane at the Pentagon.
Since the Pentagon possessed 86 separate and complete video recordings of the incident, why didn't they show some whole portions of them to those people who had doubts about it?
The FBI was immediately at the scene and took the surveillance tapes and confiscated 86 videotapes, both in the Pentagon parking lot, in the gas station, across the freeway from the Pentagon, in a nearby hotel, in all kinds of buildings that had their cameras trained in that general area.
For a long time, the military authorities refused to release the footage of Flight 77's impact. But in 2006, the United States Department of Defense was forced to yield to Freedom of Information requests, and it released 4 video sequences. The video evidence from the Pentagon's Citgo gas station and the nearby Sheraton Hotel are of no use. But 2 samples of video footage captured from the Pentagon's parking lot have been offered to the world as definitive proof of Flight 77's impact with the Pentagon. They're almost identical.
Jet engines don't emit white smoke. You have some white smoke would come out of the aft end of whatever kind of vehicle. Quite frankly, there's not enough in those photographs to tell exactly what it was. Well, you can tell what it wasn't. And it didn't have the size as compared, if it was a real 757-200, it would be much bigger than the vehicle we do see in the picture.
With the best will in the world, can you see an airplane here? The Pentagon tells us you cannot see the airplane because, unfortunately, it passed between one frame and the next. One frame and the next. So where is the airplane? According to FBI agent Jacqueline Maguire, as you can see in this affidavit, only one camera took pictures of the scene, and those are the frames that we've already seen. The story of how this airplane is supposed to have got there is absolutely absurd. One cannot imagine how, in order to get down to the height of the Pentagon wall, it was able to make a 270-degree turn at a speed of approximately 800 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, and how it did this without falling apart, by the way, and tearing itself to pieces has already been proven to be impossible for a regular 757 passenger jet plane to pull off.
Maneuver. And what I will say to you is that an experienced pilot with thousands of hours probably would have to take between 10 and 20 attempts. Skilled, thousands of hour pilot, probably 10 or 20 times before they would be able to pull off that maneuver.
757 is not designed to do that. 757 is designed to be basically a cruise ship in the sky. It's not acrobatic, so you just can't do that with one of those big airplanes. Air traffic controllers at the Dulles Approach Control, when they saw this target come in and make this turn, they said, oh, that's a fighter. Because military fighters can do that, okay? And military fighters with autopilots and being flown remotely, they have the structural capability. They are designed to be able to be that acrobatic.
And this is testimony from Danielle O'Brien, air traffic controller from Dulles Airport. Quote, the speed, the maneuverability, the way that it turned, we all thought in the radar room, all of us experienced air traffic controllers, that was a military plane. Again, this is testimony from Danielle O'Brien, an air traffic controller from Dulles Airport. They thought it was a military plane. They didn't think that it was a 757.
Absurdity of absurdities. There is also the height at which this aeroplane was flying to be explained. It is supposed to have followed the lie of the land at 6 meters from the ground for 1 kilometer, managing also to jump over a hill. Then it went over a roadway, and it finally got there without making any other turns because by now there was no more space.
They have the airplane, the story has the Flight 77 was going 530 miles an hour, 460 knots. And it can't go that fast on level flight, down that low. If you're up high, the true airspeed can go up and it can go that fast, but not down low. The air is too dense.
I challenge any pilot anywhere. Give him a Boeing 757, tell him to do 400 knots 20 feet above the ground for half a mile. Can't do. It's aerodynamically impossible.
So the story of how the airplane hit the Pentagon just doesn't make any sense at all.
After Hani Hanjour, the plane's pilot, had been identified, his flight instructor declared that his student was not even able to fly a small single-engine aeroplane.
These guys didn't have the experience to make that kind of maneuver, even if the airplane could fly that.
The man could not fly at all.
There's no way you could possibly come out of a 172 and fly a jet that you've never flown before. That's like showing me how to carve up a Christmas turkey and then say, go make a heart transplant.
Even if we suppose that such an incompetent pilot had the opportunity to fly a Boeing 757, we still have to ask ourselves how he managed to violate the most heavily protected airspace in the world.
Lo spazio aereo più protetto del mondo.
No untracked aircraft get near the Pentagon and near the White House. It just doesn't happen.
In Washington, D.C., we have one of the most restricted airspaces in the world. It's called P-56. It has a separate radar tracking system and a separate military response system.
P-56 is that restricted airspace that is around the Pentagon and the White House, and it is a highly, highly, highly sensitive area. There are supposed to be no unknown aircraft that can go through there.
That has an air defense identification zone in a 50-mile radius around D.C., and then it has a protected zone 17 miles around the Washington Monument and an inner protected zone 3 miles around the Capitol. That space is essentially unbreachable. It has to be because of the importance of the buildings there.
It's like an aviation no man's land. Nobody goes in there. Nobody.
They have F-16 and F-18 jets at Andrews Air Force Base, about 10 miles south of D.C. They also have the 113th National Guard Air Wing at Anacostia Naval Air Station that can send scrambler jets up in a very short period of time. Both are in place that day. Neither one responds at all until after the Pentagon is hit. In addition to that, the Pentagon has its own defenses.
If a plane, any kind of a plane, was coming in towards the Pentagon, why didn't the anti-aircraft missiles batteries that are there, why didn't they fire to protect the building? This is, after all, the most heavily protected building on the planet. That craft had to have been a military craft because only the military craft put out a signal. It's called an Identify Friend or Foe IFF device. And only the military craft would be allowed to approach the building.
The two radar systems that the military radars, defensive radar systems, read are a civilian transponder and a military transponder. Military transponder is called IFF. Civilian aircraft do not have an IFF transponder. They are not given that capability, okay? So if there was a 757, American 757 that went into the Pentagon, for example, and it shut off its transponder, it didn't have a military IFF transponder on it. So it was a primary target. It's a primary target going into that airspace. Should have been shot down.
What I'm describing to you is a breakdown in standard operating procedure by FAA, NORAD, P-56, and the Pentagon, all on the same day, in the middle of, after 9/05, what was known nationally to be a terrorist attack. And it makes no sense.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I've said it plenty of times. There's no way any plane should have ever gotten near the Pentagon. I don't know what hit the Pentagon, but I know what didn't hit it. It wasn't a 757. Coming up, hour number 2, more debunking, 9/11 debunking. Don't go anywhere. Crapping all over the official story and the wannabe debunkers. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. It is September 9th, 2012, 2 days before the 11-year anniversary of 9/11. And I have been playing the audio from a video I put together last year debunking the Fox News double hit pieces on 9/11 truth, including having James Megs from Popular Mechanics on again. Now, as I said in the first hour, I think it's interesting that they haven't barely even touched 9/11. Everything's been focusing on the memorial, no attack on 9/11 truth itself. Choosing this year to ignore it like it doesn't even exist. Interesting tactic. Old, but very tried and true method. It does work sometimes, at least with fooling the masses, the general public. So let's get back right into the video here. Starting with right where we left off. It's going to finish up at the Pentagon really quick, and then it's going to get into the next section. So here we go.
There is nobody anywhere at any point in this entire investigation that has said that is positively American 77. They suppose it, they presume it, they assume it, they say this is what we think it is.
Flight 93 was hit by air-to-air missile, and it wasn't some expert who supposedly was with the North Dakota Air National Guard said he's the guy who pulled the trigger.
Well, there was somebody who claimed that he could identify the guy. It was an outrageous smear on an actual officer, and not the case at all.
And then one other very dramatic thing that our local troops are doing. And believe it or not, at the request of the White House.
And by the way, you guys can't see it, so I'll have to give you an idea of what you'd be looking at if you saw the video. This is a news report from 9/11 that day from the local Fox 5 affiliate in Washington, D.C. And this is Fox saying that there's no evidence. And then in this particular instance, I used a clip from their own, one of their own local affiliates, owned by Fox. Here you go.
This is what's so interesting about living and working in Washington, D.C. The mayor called upon the Army National Guard to do several things, and the White House also called out the D.C. Air National Guard. Earlier today, an F-16 fighter aircraft from the 113th Wing of the D.C. Air National Guard was actually called upon to intercept a second aircraft that was perceived to be yet another threat to the Pentagon. They aren't giving any details as to exactly how they deterred that plane. Perhaps they'll be able to share that with us as the days go by and it's not such a sensitive situation. But in any case, it is possible that there was a second aircraft that was headed toward the Pentagon, and because of the D.C. Air National Guard, that situation was taken care of.
Higher in the skies, the D.C. Air National Guard flew F-16s for air defense. One of those F-16s was requested by the White House and helped deter a second suspicious plane that appeared to be headed for the Pentagon.
There was a second airplane that was approaching the Pentagon, and they went up to discourage anything happening there.
It's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force.
I want to take our viewers live to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our Brian Cabell is standing by. This, of course, is the site where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed on its way from Newark to San Francisco, crashed on Tuesday. And I understand in this investigation there's some breaking news. Brian, what can you tell us?
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site. which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away. So it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course, but there were some cell phone callers, one cell phone caller in particular, who said he saw a bomb or something that looked like a bomb with one of the hijackers also. The man who took over the plane apparently announced that at one point there was a bomb on board the plane. So again, we don't want to speculate, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but what we do know is that there is a site about a half mile behind me where the plane went down, where most of the debris is, and then about 6 miles away up by a lake, there is another area that's been cordoned off, and state police and the FBI have said definitely there is debris from the plane located there. We have a crew on the way right now. We should have pictures of that a little bit later on. In the meantime, the search here goes on. 80 searchers going foot by foot, combing the area, looking for evidence. They have not yet found the black box. Darren?
And by the way, that was CNN live at the time. CNN live at the time, back 11 years ago.
Which was my first question, so I'll move on to my next one, Brian. We don't want to speculate about this large debris field, but it seems to me from covering a number of plane crashes on the scene that, if nothing else, you can say this is not typical for a plane crash to be spread across an area this large.
It certainly doesn't make sense because most of the debris has been found in a very compact area within 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe a little beyond that. And then all of a sudden they're telling us 6 miles away they have another concentration of debris. They say it's very small pieces. Most of these are very small pieces. Most of the pieces here are no bigger than the size of a briefcase, they say, and the pieces 6 miles away, maybe even smaller than that. They have talked to a number of individuals here. They say they have talked to people who saw this plane during the final moments. They haven't confirmed whether they talked to anybody who saw this plane actually land, or crash rather. And as to whether it broke up on the way, we don't know that. FBI is being very tight-lipped about that. But again, it leads to that possibility. It certainly leads to a number of questions.
You mentioned they have yet to find the black box. It would seem to me, when you compare the 4 plane crashes of Tuesday, this would be the site where they would be most likely to find a black box.
That's what they told us initially, and I think they're somewhat disappointed they haven't found it. It's been 48 hours, but they are still hopeful they will find it. There is a pond nearby this particular site. They may have to send divers into the pond. They haven't done that yet, but conceivably it could be in the pond. It could be anywhere. It could be at this other debris site. They've also found some other debris scattered around this area. They say, in fact, some individuals have been collecting it. Again, we're talking about very, very tiny parts. The biggest part they found at this site is an engine part, and most of the other pieces are probably no bigger than this particular notebook. So again, very small pieces. They had hoped to find the black box by now. They're still voicing optimism they will find it.
It's not an assignment I would wish on anybody, but I would say that you would have to have an assignment like that to appreciate what that looks like.
Mind you, I just want to interject something really quick. The absurdity of the official story trying to get you to believe that they couldn't find pieces of a plane, an engine, okay? Those things are super dense. They can survive fires of over 3,000 degrees centigrade. That's actually much hotter than Fahrenheit, okay? So they could withstand these fires and temperatures, okay? Oh, you see all these other plane crashes, there would be debris. And this guy's saying there's nothing bigger than the size of his notebook, right? Yet, all these plane parts that were vaporized, the same force was not able to vaporize the less dense human flesh. And they were able to identify all of the passengers on board the plane. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Like when a plane comes crashing into the ground and basically just drops out of the sky. Brian Cabell in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, thank you very much.
I'm standing there watching on TV, and the lights flickered in the building. About that time, we heard the engines roar, and we took off out of the building. As we were coming out from the office out through the building, the ground shook, and we heard, a big boom. Looked over and saw the big ball of fire up in the air. Like I said, probably within 45 seconds or a minute of impact, we were there. We were there before any firemen, any paramedics, or anybody. We were on site. When we got there, there was a plane flying up above, and he was smart. He flew straight for the sun, so you couldn't look at it and see exactly what type of plane or if it was a fighter or what it was. But we caught a glimpse of it, and as he was swinging, he was basically traveling in the same direction as the plane. It was in Atlanta, and that was this past winter. Was in Yamaha training, And I was sitting there talking. Everybody, of course, asked where you're from, introduce yourself to everybody in the classroom. And of course, now we just say Shanksville, where a plane crashed, and everybody knows where we're at. So I was sitting there talking to another guy, and I was telling about, he said, did you see the plane crash and whatever, was you there or anything? And I told him the whole story. And I was explaining to him about whenever we were standing in the office and the lights flickered and everything. And there was another gentleman sitting in the row in front of me that was retired from the Air Force. And as soon as he heard me say that, he immediately stopped me and he said, tell me this. And I told him, and he says, well, I'm retired from the Air Force. He said, that plane shot down.
Going to break, you heard the testimony. You were hearing the testimony of a witness. Obviously, you heard him say that he lives in Shanksville, and he was the manager of a bar and grill or something there. And he was a witness to Flight 93's quote-unquote demise. So I rewound it just a few seconds so you could hear what he said again going out to break.
The lights flickered and everything, and there was another gentleman sitting in the row in front of me that was retired from the Air Force. And as soon as he heard me say that, he immediately stopped me and he said, tell me this. And I told him, and he says, well, I'm retired from the Air Force. He said, that plane was shot down. And I said, why? And he said, because whenever the lights flickered, they zapped the radar frequency on everything before they shoot. And he said, that's why your lights flickered. Your lights didn't flicker from the impact. Your lights flickered because they zapped the radar system before they shot it.
Have a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face.
Donnie Rumsfeld.
If the people who bombed the Best Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania.
28 minutes after the World Trade Center attack, F-16s from the Air National Guard's 119th Fighter Wing were bearing down on Washington at the speed of sound.
This is CBS News report.
Go here fast is pretty much the orders we got, so we went there fast and set up a cap.
Right over Washington, D.C.
Yep.
These are two of the three pilots who set up that cap, or Combat Air Patrol, over Washington. For security, we're not using their names, just their call signs, Lou and Honey.
You can tell from the tone of the voice, the tone of the radio calls, and we were at war. One call they asked, essentially, it was the Pentagon. We could confirm the Pentagon was on fire, and we let them know that.
You see the west side of the Pentagon, and at that point it was engulfed in flames.
There was a big smoking hole there, which, it was a sight I don't know if I'll ever forget.
They reached the Pentagon 12 minutes after it was hit, but United Flight 93 was still speeding toward Washington. There would be plenty of time, at least 20 minutes, for the F-16s to intercept Flight 93. The next thing the fighters knew, someone they believed was with the Secret Service was on the radio, wanting to know what kind of missiles they were carrying.
In terms of guns in the air, they wanted to know what was available to them.
Yes.
It was a garbled radio call, so it wasn't clear. So exactly what was said, but it was something to effect of keep planes away from the house or something like that. You didn't know exactly what it was. It was garbled.
And they meant what?
Keep planes away from the White House.
They didn't know it at the time, but the president had authorized them to shoot down United 93.
That's not something you've ever trained for, shooting down a civilian airliner.
But that's actually not true. That's a lie.
No. Could you have done that?
Well, I mean, if it's a lawful order and authenticated appropriately, it's something you would have had to have done. Probably would have double, triple checked the authentication and confirmed it with your flight numbers to make sure, am I hearing this right? But that's what you had to do, and you got the order to do it. You do it.
You got to trust the people controlling you on the ground have more pieces of the puzzle than you have up there, and you just got to trust them.
That little audio tidbit right there was why I played that piece. I threw that piece of the clip in there, but without the full report in its context, you wouldn't have understood I guess the idiosyncrasies of it. But here you have these two pilots saying, hey, we would have shot it down. Did they shoot it down? I don't know. None of us really know. All of this is speculation. What I do know is that the official story that the plane crashed by itself out in the middle of an abandoned coal mine or something out in the middle of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And there's no records or anything else. That scene looks really staged. It really does. The coroner that was there, everything that, if you've ever read up on it, the guy said he stopped being the coroner. I think after his quote is after the first 15 minutes or something, he realized his job as coroner was no longer necessary at the scene because there were no bodies. Or something to that effect. It's really suspect that they couldn't find any bodies, but they were still able to identify everybody through their DNA from the crash site. A lot of shady things. But the point is, I was ripping apart the Fox News and Popular Mechanics debunking end of it. So it was important to stay on track with that and not go too far off, because you have to, in order to be able, sometimes, especially with a dumbed-down mass populace, in order to even get them to comprehend this, okay, because I don't speak to the choir or preach to the choir when I put this stuff together or anything like that. I don't expect the people that already know what's going on or have researched it to glean anything new from this, but it's the people that are not fully awake that might say, oh, well, Fox News and Popular Mechanics, I respect Popular Mechanics. So you have to go at it from that end and destroy their straw man argument. Once you destroy that straw man that's presented, then we can give, hopefully, we can send them on the right track. Some people might still not believe it, but you can at least, that's the best way to attack someone's straw man, and is to not come at it with something that will be looked at as equally as insane. You have to just deconstruct their straw man with facts, and then we can give out the rest of the info. All right, here we go.
What they're telling you to do is correct.
I'm sure you've thought this over. You would have pulled the trigger?
Oh, yeah, I would have.
You've worked as an airline
No
pilot.
hesitation on his behalf, huh?
Mm-hmm. It just strikes me as the most terrible order that a man in an F-16 could ever get. Yeah, me too.
How many times did we hear that Building 7 was professionally demolished?
And that was a tough one because because that building was not hit by a plane. In the end, it was proven that it was the result of prolonged fires that weakened the internal structure of the building.
And of course, Rosie O'Donnell famously said, with that, it's the first time in history that fire melted steel.
A lot of people had a hard time understanding how buildings could fall down as a result of fire. But what we found is it doesn't take temperatures high enough to melt steel. It just has to.
You see what, I have to pause it. You see what Steve Douchey just did? Okay. Do you see what he just did? He created a straw man. That's what he did. He said, oh, Rosie O'Donnell said. Rosie O'Donnell didn't come out and say that, I proclaim that this is the first time. That's not. She came out and enunciated information, okay, that was a fact. She didn't come out, but see, he builds a straw man. He tells you that it was Rosie O'Donnell who came out and said that. So that way, when you get people that don't like Rosie O'Donnell, they say, that's stupid, when she should just shut up. Yes, no, she's talking about that. And I'm not defending her. I'm just trying to point out how the fact that that's a straw man.
Heat up the steel so it expands and then softens and weakens the structure until it collapses.
Okay, and one of the...
I lost my husband.
My son.
My uncle.
My nephew. September 11th, 2001.
Most people don't know a third tower fell that day.
The government says fire brought it down.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
I, along with 1,400 other architects and engineers,
have found the government's conclusion to be physically impossible.
Impossible.
We need the truth about what happened that day.
Go to rememberbuilding7.org.
Why it fell, why it matters, and what you can do.
I'll pause it right there and we'll pick it up with Building 7, one of the smoking guns of 9/11, which on Wednesday you'll hear Mark Passio and myself get into the occult aspect of that. Don't go anywhere.
In 1984, construction began on World Trade Center Building 7, a 47-story office building 300 feet away from the North Tower. It opened to the public in 1987 and housed offices for Department of Defense, Internal Revenue Service, and was also the Secret Service's largest field office. Building 7 was considered the Central Intelligence Agency's largest station outside of Washington, D.C. The details of the office's functions remain classified. The Securities and Exchange Commission was also using the building to store 3,000 to 4,000 files related to their investigations. And, of course, they have no record of what those files were. On June 8, 1999, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management Command Center on the 23rd floor is opened.
The new facility is located in downtown Manhattan, across the street from the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. The command center on the 23rd floor is bulletproof and bomb-resistant, with its own air supply and generators. It's linked to city airports, the Coast Guard, and the Pentagon. Computers will soon have detailed blueprints of every major building in New York City, as well as evacuation routes. Hurricanes and heat waves would be handled here, as well as terrorist attacks. Though New York officials say their facility is not impenetrable, they're confident it could handle even the worst crisis imaginable. Deborah Fayerick for CNN, New York.
On the morning of 9/11, before the first plane strikes the North Tower, Building 7's alarm system was unexpectedly placed on test status at 6:47 a.m. for a scheduled period of 8 hours. This normally occurs during maintenance, and any fire alarms from the building were to be disregarded. After the second plane strikes the South Tower, Building 7's power was deliberately shut off and its tenants evacuated. Following the collapse of the North Tower, almost all of the surrounding World Trade Center buildings were completely destroyed, but the structures remained standing. Building 3, a 22-story building directly below the Twin Towers, was split in half by the South Tower's collapse. Although the building was severely crushed by falling debris, the structure remained standing. Building 4, a 9-story building east of the South Tower, was almost completely flattened. The remaining structure did not collapse. Building 5, a 9-story building east of the North Tower, suffered from severe fires and structural damage. Building 6, an 8-story building between the North Tower and Building 7, suffered a giant gouge in its roof and severe fires. Neither Building 5 or 6 suffered a collapse. Neither did the Deutsche Bank building, which stands to this day and is currently being demolished beam by beam. Neither did the Millennium Hotel across the street. Building 7, a 47-story office building hundreds of feet away, burns controllably over a few floors and suffers structural damage to its south face before collapsing completely to the ground at near free fall speed. The collapse of Building 7 was rarely reported on the day of and after 9/11.
Yeah, it's very strange that was not even hit by a jet, and then it falls very rapidly and essentially straight down into its footprints.
Although the collapse of Building 7 was clearly a phenomenon and further investigation was needed, the building's steel was removed from the site and destroyed. No pieces were recovered from the debris for analysis. However, FEMA's volunteer investigators revealed after their limited studies that some pieces of steel from the rubble of Building 7 experienced something never before seen in an office fire. Some pieces of steel had large holes burned through them, evidence that a high-temperature corrosive material had formed and burned through the beams, suggesting temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Celsius were present.
But what the Worcester Polytechnic Institute scientists reported was that steel, as they looked at it, using similar methods to what we've used on the red grade chips, these are electron microscope methods and X-ray EDS methods. They found high temperature, indication of very high temperatures, oxidation and sulfidation, sulfur in the steel.
Yet, this phenomenon will not be mentioned again, either by FEMA or other agencies investigating the collapse.
Now let's fast forward to August of last year, 2008. NIST finally came out with their preliminary report. Now, it's very interesting. They ruled out diesel fuel fires. They said it is due, and they also ruled out any type of fatal damage from the towers collapsing, particularly the North Tower, which is across the street, Vesey Street, I think. And so there's some damage, sure, but they ruled out it was not fatal, and it did not contribute to the initiation of the collapse. That's what NIST said, and I agree with that.
When questioned at a public comment session after the draft's release, NIST was forced to acknowledge that the collapse of WTC-7 experienced a period of freefall for 105 feet.
That is acceleration at 32.2 feet per second squared, which is just dropping a ball in a vacuum, and that's how fast it accelerates. Finally,
in case people don't get what he's saying, is that means there was 105 feet of non-resistance where the building there was no resistance. From a building that was structurally sound, suddenly there was no resistance, meaning the floors below it didn't offer any resistance to collapse for 105 feet. But no type of explosives were used. No.
In their final report, they have this agreement, having been with Chandler and with my comment also, that there was indeed acceleration, not just constant speed, and acceleration at the acceleration due to gravity. In other words, free fall. And they even mentioned free fall for about 105 feet. That's about 8 stories. Now that means, according to what they had previously said in August, which is correct, earlier, August 26th, nothing is in the way of the roof. Nothing. Now, you can see in the videos, there's a lot of floors still intact as the roof is moving as a block. So somewhere down below, there's about 8 floors that have been obliterated. I mean, you can't just have the floors sitting there stationary, because that would be mass in the way, and that would slow this acceleration down. Nothing's in the way. The only way I can see how to do that is with controlled demolition, with explosives, to remove that. That's what you do in controlled demolition. You get all this material out of the way, then the upper block travels at close to free fall. In this case, at free fall. It's really amazing.
It's funny Stephen would mention explosives and material being removed. 2 eyewitnesses independently claimed to news channels on 9/11 that they experienced an explosion inside the lower levels of Building 7. The first one is Michael Hess, who went on to UPN 9 News around 11:59 a.m.
Oil refineries in Louisiana.
And we have Frank Uciardo back on the phone with us, Brenda, with some New York City officials. Frank, go ahead.
That's right. I'm standing here right now just off Broadway by City Hall with Michael Hess, who is the city's corporation counsel. Mr. Hess, you were trapped in, I believe, 7 World Trade Center. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was. I was up in the emergency management center on the 23rd floor, and when all the power went out in the building, another gentleman and I walked down to the 8th floor where there was an explosion, and we've been trapped on the 8th floor with smoke, thick smoke all around us for about an hour and a half. But the New York Fire Department, as terrific as they are, just came and got us out.
And the second is Barry Jennings, who went on to ABC7 shortly after noon.
We're going to bring more of those to you now. Barry Jennings, you're on the 8th floor. You work for the City Housing Department. Explain to me the moment of impact.
Well, me and Mr. Hess, the corporation counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get...
By the way, you see the wording by the reporter? Tell me the impact. Impact. There was no plane that hit the building, but right off the bat, they're trying to set in your mind that a third plane hit that building, even though it didn't. Key word play.
Get out of here. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. And I turned to Hess. I said, this is it. We're dead. We're not going to make it out of here. I took a fire extinguisher and I bust the window out. That's when this gentleman here heard my cries for help.
We tracked Barry down in June 2007 to interview him and hopefully elaborate on his experience.
Hi, my name is Barry Jennings. I'm 52 years old.
I'm going to pause it right there because we got a break coming up, ladies and gentlemen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewind it in about 10 seconds so you can hear Barry introduce himself again. And coming right back in, I'm going to play it right out of the break so I can get as much info about Barry out as possible. Now, again, I couldn't even get through the whole clip because there's just not enough time. That much evidence to debunk their quote-unquote debunking. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Barry Jennings. I'm 52 years old. I've worked for 33 years at one location. Basically, that's it. I'm married, father of 4. It was very funny. I was on my way to work. Traffic was excellent. I received a call that a small Cessna had hit the World Trade Center. And I was asked to go and man the Office of Emergency Management at the World Trade Center 7 on the 23rd floor. As I arrived there were police all in the lobby. They showed me the way to the elevator. We got up to the 23rd floor. Me and Mr. Hess, who I didn't know was Mr. Hess at the time, we got to the 23rd floor. We couldn't get in. We had to go back down. Then security and police took us to the freight elevators where they took us back up, and we did get in. Upon arriving into the OEM EOC, we noticed that everybody was gone. I saw coffee that was on a desk. Still, the smoke was still coming off the coffee. I saw half-eaten sandwiches. And only me, Mr. Hess, was up there. After I called several individuals, one individual told me that to leave and leave right away. Mr. Hess came running back in and said, we're the only ones up here, we got to get out of here. He found the stairwell. When we reached the 8th or the 6th floor, the landing that we were standing on gave way. There was an explosion and the landing gave way. And I was left there hanging. I had to climb back up, and now I had to walk back up to the 8th floor. After getting to the 8th floor, everything was dark. It was dark and it was very, very hot. Very hot. I asked Mr. Hess to test the phones as I took a fire extinguisher and broke out the windows. Once I broke out the windows, I could see outside below me. I saw police cars on fire, buses on fire. I looked one way, the building was there. I looked the other way, it was gone. I was trapped in there for several hours. I was trapped in there when both buildings came down. The firefighters came. They came to the window, and because I was going to come out on the fire hose. I didn't want to stay there any longer. It was too hot. I was going to come out on the fire hose. They came to the window. They started yelling, "Do not do that. It won't hold you." And then they ran away. See, I didn't know what was going on. That's when the first tower fell. When they started running, the first tower was coming down. I had no way of knowing that. Then I saw them come back. Now I saw them come back with more concern on their faces. And then they ran away again. The second tower fell. So as they turned and ran the second time, the guy said, "Don't worry, we'll be back for you." And they did come back. This time they came back with 10 firefighters. And they kept asking, "Where are you? We don't know where you are." I said, "I'm on the north side of the building," because when I was on the stairs, I saw north side. All this time, I'm hearing all type of explosions. All this time, I'm hearing explosions. And I'm thinking that maybe it's the buses around me that were on fire, the cars on fire. I don't see no, but I'm still hearing these explosions. When they finally got to us, and they took us down to what they called the lobby, because I asked them, I said, when we got down there, I said, "Where are we?" He said, "This was the lobby." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." It was total ruins. Total ruins. Now keep in mind, when I came in there, the lobby had nice escalators. It was a huge lobby. And for me to see what I saw, it was unbelievable. And the firefighter that took us down kept saying, "Do not look down." And I kept saying why. He said, "Do not look down." And we were stepping over people. And you can feel when you're stepping over people. They took us out through a hole that I don't know who made this hole in this wall. That's how they got us out. They took us out through a hole, through the wall, to safety. As they were taking me out, one firefighter had fallen. I believe he was having a heart attack. But before that, this big giant police officer came to me. And he says, you have to run. I said, I can't run. My knees are swollen. He said, you're going to have to get on your knees and crawl in. He said, because we have reports of more explosions. And that's when I started crawling. And I saw this guy fall behind me. And his comrades came to his aid. They dragged him to safety. I was looking for an ambulance for my knees. And at that time, they told me, we got to walk 20 blocks to refuge. Before I got there, Eyewitness News grabbed me and started interviewing me. And that's basically it.
This is where the story takes a turn for the worst. In late August 2008, comments began appearing on YouTube videos of Barry's testimony, claiming he had passed away on August 19th, 2008. 2 days before NIST releases its draft report on WTC-7, which directly contradicts Barry's testimony and claims that no explosions occurred inside the building. They explicitly claim there were no witness reports of such a loud noise. To date, the only publicly available information is that Barry was in perfect health before suddenly being admitted to the hospital and subsequently passing away on August 19th, 2008. A private investigator, when hired to investigate the disappearance of Barry Jennings, replied, "Due to some of the information I have uncovered, I have determined that this is a job for the police. I have refunded your credit card. Please do not contact me again concerning this individual."
Which I have to interject for a second as a retired PI myself, because I was a PI for a few years. That's highly abnormal. Yes, we would refer things to the police department, but we would never refund someone's credit card. We did the work. We got paid for what we did. Here's the outcome. It might not be what you wanted, but it is what it is. And any PI will tell you that. So either she was paid off or she was threatened.
In conclusion, 2 men inside World Trade Center Building 7, a skyscraper that housed numerous government agencies whose duties are unknown to the public, are almost killed by an explosion before either of the Twin Towers fell. Although it is damaged far less than any other surrounding World Trade Center buildings, at 5:20 p.m., it collapses into its own footprint, experiencing 105 feet of freefall and barely damaging surrounding structures. And the official government report, which takes almost 7 years to write, says it was all due to fire.
The new things in this particular update that you've got is there are some guys who claim to have collected some air samples, and in that air sample was what?
Some dust. They call it nanothermite. Now, thermite is a compound that if you apply it in a certain way, it can actually melt metal in certain conditions. And they're claiming they've given up on the idea there were bombs in the building. That was the original claim. Now they're saying, oh, there was some kind of nanothermite. And of course, you talk to demolition experts, the whole idea is ridiculous. But what it shows is how the conspiracy theories keep evolving as one gets knocked down. They never change their conclusions. They just come up with new evidence. Now they're literally claiming their best evidence is grains of dust found in the street near Ground Zero.
NIST admitted in April 2007 that they are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse, and also that they conducted no tests for explosive residue. Luckily, somebody has.
Now, I'll pause it there. I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to get this thing up. I'll have to try to perhaps just build our own little video player on Federal Jack for a couple of my flicks that I've put together that YouTube has destroyed. I got to talk to my IT guys and see what I can come up with. I'll have to build something custom. We used to have a thing called TrueTube back in the day, or TruthTube. I think it was TruthTube, something like that. It was a couple of years ago, and the server it was on had gotten attacked for something else that we had for another website that we had constructed, and it was one of the casualties. And then when we were rebuilding it, we wanted to get it right back up and going, and we wanted to make it faster because it was really slow. And we, without charging people a monthly fee for it, we wouldn't have been able to run it, so it was just too much. But I'll figure out how to get the videos themselves up there so you guys can at least see them, and I'll when I do, I'll let everyone know, because there's another, I don't know, probably 35, 40 minutes at least of video, and it's better to see the video in its context. But for people that don't know what's going on with 9/11, who maybe have never even heard of it, remember it somewhat, however they're told to remember it, like the government's official version, and that would buy into the Fox News crap. That's why I played the clip. I wanted to debunk their little crappy debunking. And this is the official story that's jammed down your throat, that 19 guys in a cave were able to do all of this and pull all of this off. And by the way, that was his little fallacy at the end there, Megs. He said, well, first they thought bombs were in it, and they now they've moved on to this stuff. No one's moved on from anything. No one says that bombs weren't used. You can't use thermite and bombs together. That's just too far out there. It's just, it's disgusting. But the average person is so busy, they look at this guy, they think, oh, he's Popular Mechanics. I hope this helped debunk some of that for those of you that might buy into it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you stay tuned in for Joe Joseph, Conspiracy Chronicles, coming up next. And make sure you tune in Wednesday, 9/12, the occult symbolism and the occult aspects to 9/11. I'm out.